Hi, this is a lived experience practitioner diary entry, and I'm doing this entry because I think this is a letter that I've written a letter and I just realised this letter probably will be really helpful to anyone who's designing lived experience practitioner working structures and systems. The inspiration behind it all, what led me to write it is something that happens in most places. People will be designing systems and structures for lived experience working, and what will often happen is this will be led by non-lived experience staff. So when I say that, I mean staff who don't work in lived experience specific roles, and then they will gather other non-lived experience staff. They'll gather service users. So these are people who receive mental health services but who don't work within mental health systems, and also often people that work within the organisation as lived experience practitioners, but generally most of the time these people will be staff who work in often very low banded and low paid roles. So the most common one being peer support worker. So it's also a role that doesn't involve sort of any training or qualification, or the job role itself doesn't involve system or structural design, consultation, etc. So essentially what you have is a basically a very lopsided group that's trying to design something that really none of them have got expertise in, because people who receive services aren't working inside services. They've never seen that side before. They don't know the levels of discrimination people face. Staff, even if they have lived experience, don't know what it's like to work as a lived experience practitioner worker. Peer support workers will, depending on how long they've been working, some of them will absolutely know and understand how difficult. People who are quite new to the role may not understand that so much. But what you don't have with people who've worked in a peer support worker role is they won't have worked in a lived experience consultant role, and they're different. So this is the issue I always have, where basically a group is brought together and people like to rubber stamp it by saying, oh yeah, we've co-produced, but actually you haven't. So this was my response to it, just to try and explain it, and I'm just hoping it might help. It might help someone else. It's probably not going to help me. I've probably absolutely messed up by by sending it and being about as subtle as a brick. However, if you take the principles, it might be good for taking and using within like a teaching session or something. I don't know. I'll shut up. Anyway, so at the beginning I just kind of thank the person for responding to something else, and what I say is that the measures currently for developing supports and structures for staff with mental health conditions, including lived experience practitioners, are inadequate, and they may lead to harm of lived experience practitioner staff. They say that they consist of doing this with peer support workers, non-lived experience staff, volunteers and service users. There are no lived experience practitioner consultants, who work strategically on an equal with the non-lived experienced staff being employed to lead and develop this work. So that's the first paragraph. Because discrimination is so hard to explain, I've tried to use what I've tried to do is use the example of racial discrimination and taking the principle of that to, because people know and they're starting to understand that more now. There's a language being developed, and to try and help to see something that can't be seen. So carry on. Because you are familiar and have educated yourself on racial discrimination, I'll link to similar examples of discrimination in this context, as it may help to contextualise and explain each issue. So starting off with non-lived experienced staff. Most non-lived experienced staff in mental health services have got a lived experience. Estimates are currently that this is around 75% of the workforce. As non-lived experienced staff do not have experience of working in this way, their experience is different. So in other words, if they don't work as non-lived experienced staff do not work as lived experienced staff, they don't know what it's like to do that role. So to equate their own experience as a generic staff member and to try to apply this to staff who work openly in this way may be detrimental to lived experienced staff. This is because they have not experienced the same level of discrimination or stigma. Their career pathway is not structurally blocked in an overt way where they cannot apply for progression posts because they do not exist. The stigma and discrimination is usually invisible and it's not understood. The equivalent in racial discrimination would be employing white people who have no training in and who do not have an understanding of structural racial discrimination to lead the development of systems that address and provide support to black people. When my nan married my granddad in the 40s, she loved him, but she couldn't have comprehended the issues he faced coming over to a white majority country. This was pre-Windrush. So, context, my nan was white, my granddad was black, come over from Guyana. So my granddad was in the Air Force. He was very clever, but in the Air Force he washed the pots and the pans. Later on, the white social worker he had an affair with and helped him put his children into care so they wouldn't get in the way and likely what was I trying to say here? Yeah, so I've got the white social worker he had an affair with and who helped him put his children into care so they wouldn't get in the way, likely did not understand the difference of experience that black children in the 50s would have versus their white counterparts in care. Maybe she didn't care because this did not benefit her. So I don't I'm wondering now if I've put that in a very convoluted way, but essentially what I'm trying to say is my nan loved my granddad very much. However, she couldn't have comprehended the issues he was going through. Also, the social worker who helped put his, she's having it off with him, she helped put his kids into care so he could carry on with an affair. Now, I'd like to think that she wouldn't have known how bad it could be for, black kids going into care in the 50s compared to white kids. But like I say, maybe she didn't care because it doesn't benefit her. And that the sad thing about that is that I think that applies to non-lived experience staff when it comes to thinking about lived experience practitioners. Some people really do care, really care passionately, but that doesn't equate to understanding. And some people might know, but they don't really care, and they're not going to do anything about it because it doesn't benefit them. That's what I was trying to say. Might not be very clear. So we talked about non-lived experience staff. So now come on to volunteers. Volunteers, sometimes called experts by experience, are people who receive services but do not work within them. They do not have any knowledge of the experience of their lived experience practitioner counterparts. They are not paid for their work. This could be likened to people who live in black majority countries who do not have the experience of black people in white majority countries. They're black too, but their experience is different. People like my granddad coming over to the motherland in the 40s and 50s, they thought they were coming over for a better life. The motherland had said that they needed people to come over and work, and so people were willing to come over here to leave their loved ones, to leave their homes for what they thought was an opportunity. The people who were well qualified thought this was going to mean they would be employed in posts that were equivalent to these. They hadn't yet begun living there, so they could only have an illusion of what this was going to be like on the other side. It wouldn't have been appropriate for them to have asked it wouldn't have been appropriate to have asked these people to develop a support system for people already living there in the motherland, just because they were about to live there and they'd been asked to apply for an opportunity to live there. So essentially, speaks for itself, doesn't it? I'll carry on. So, peer support workers. Peer support workers are people who are working in entry-level posts. This doesn't mean they're entry-level. You know, you could have, and you do have, people with PhDs, people who've come from professional backgrounds, highly professional, who end up working in these entry-level posts because they've got nothing else to go to. Don't get me on that soapbox. But anyway, peer support workers are people who are working in entry-level posts. Their work is focused on interactions with fellow people who receive services, but from within a service. Their posts do not involve designing and developing services. They are not trained to do this unless they have done so externally to their post. They are paid very low wages. Their remuneration does not equate to the remuneration of people employed to specifically work strategically. To ask them to work on an equal basis to their non-lived experience colleagues is exploitative and morally wrong. Locally, peer support workers are relatively new to their posts and do not have links to the lived experience practitioner knowledge and colleagues working nationally in the area, particularly in a strategic or senior capacity. It would be unfair and exploitative to task them with, and I didn't finish that sentence, but what I meant was it's unfair and exploitative to task them with designing systems and strategies and supports when A, they're not being paid for it, and B, that's not, it's not in their job description. Well, what I mean is, like, it's not their job description, but they're not getting paid for it, they're not getting paid for it, but also they might not be trained for it. Okay, before I get on the soapbox, I'll carry on. So, I'll give an example here. When I first joined our organisation, I was warned about systemic discrimination by external lived experience practitioner colleagues. I did not listen because my non-lived experience colleagues seemed like nice, friendly people. So basically, before I come into an organisation, people are like, oh, discrimination, and this is what it's like working within non-lived experience-led organisations. I'm like, no, these people I'm working with are really nice. So I had relevant experience and qualifications, and I thought that being an equal staff member would mean that I was equal. So, giving a personal example, my dad was a black 5-year-old boy in the care system in the 50s. Do you remember I gave that example before? He slept in large dormitories in one of the London homes. It took my nan 2 years to locate and find her children. She was a white woman who carried the shame of marrying a black man. My dad describes the 2 years in the children's home as the best years of his childhood. He wasn't being savagely beaten. He got shoes on his feet. He got clothes on his back. He wasn't starving. He had food. His expectations of care were very low. My dad's experience of care in the 50s would not qualify him to design an adequate care system to meet children's needs now or then. My dad was also very clever, self-taught. He learnt public speaking from his strict, high-control religious background. He spent his working and personal life believing that if he behaved as a white person, was eloquently spoken, I didn't put spoken in, worked hard, behaved in a way that didn't fit a negative black stereotype should be in inverted commas, that he would be equal. He was a good black man. He was never equal. He never had a career. He seems to have shifted very slightly in his understanding of racism in his 60s and 70s. Well, it's a bit late now, isn't it? So, as another example, my step-granddad was a much kinder man than my granddad. He was a good person. His skin was very dark, and most people could barely understand his thick, fast Guyanan accent, including his family. Anyway, he knew what it was like to be an immigrant in the 50s. I put in Guyana. What I meant was coming from Guyana to the UK. However, this didn't stop him in his old age reading the Daily Mail and ranting about immigrants coming into this country. Bless him. He's gone now, but bless him. He'd be sat on his sofa reading the Mail. Just, oh my goodness. So anyway, if a system for care for children were being designed, my dad would not have been the best person to design it. If a system of support for immigrants were being designed, my granddad wouldn't have been the best person to do it, even though he's an immigrant. He reads the Mail, that's why. So, my friend is a black woman who is an equality and diversity consultant. She reads continuously, she keeps up her CPD, her qualifications. She would be the person that would be employed at a consultant's rate of pay, given the respect, responsibility and authority that would go with that role. Currently, the steering groups are missing consultant LXPs to lead this work. It's essentially like asking white people, inexperienced and qualified in structural racism, to lead the design of systems and support for black people. It's the equivalent of including black people who don't work in the organisation and black people working in the organisation who are entry-level posts, paid and valued very poorly. Whilst it is important to include these people within the design, it would also need to be led by a black expert in designing systems of support. The consultant would need to be trained, qualified and experienced and undertake regular CPD and supervision for their work. They would also be adequately paid for their work. There are moral, ethical and equality reasons for ensuring that LXP consultants are included within this work and that they lead the work. The other reason is to genuinely avoid harm to LXP staff going forward. Currently, I'm writing this from my bed. This is the bed I'm still fucking in. Today, I haven't moved from it, except to go for the toilet. Anyway, I am in between 2 of the 3 physical and mental health specialists I need to see this week due to my health rapidly deteriorating because of the discrimination and lack of support I receive at work. I know that current plans to design support will not be adequate that peer support staff, volunteers and generic staff cannot know what support, CPD, supervision and training I need as an LXP consultant. Most are not experts in complex mental health needs, and particularly in the innovative levels of LXP working within the field. Their knowledge and structures are being developed that will cause me immediate and further harm, and that eventually, as some of the LXPs develop within their entry-level posts, they too will experience the harm I am experiencing now. Some of them already have. We know of 3 people who ended up in hospital due to work-related distress, including me. Actually, that wasn't including me. Including me would be 4 people. This issue is not unique to one organisation. A similar example has been Health Education England's development of a peer support worker competency framework that was not developed by experts who worked within peer support. This has been highly criticised by many, including the National Service User Network, who have actively distanced themselves from this work. They've given a response to the framework here, and then I've put a link in to a response given on the Ensign National Service User website on this. Basically, this Health Education England thing went down like a bomb. Absolute shitstorm. So this was their response to it. So very interesting. Anyway, next paragraph. Ensign commissioned and paid me to write a response blog. They did so in my capacity of having knowledge in the area of co-production. They respected this and felt that I could provide insight. I understand that there may be some cognitive dissonance in this regard. It may be unhelpful to read the blog because of this, as the writing of others may hold more weight for you, but the link is here if you're interested. So I've put the link then, and this was in kind of response to what had happened with the Health Education England fiasco, and I'd written about lived experience leadership, and particularly why we end up always at the bottom of the pile, and kind of using some of Beyond's ideas of kind of group theory, and kind of, why do lived experience people always end up in that scapegoat position? Why are they never kind of at the top or leading anything? So that was what I'd written about. The thing is, again, what I know is that if I'm in one little world or little ecosystem where I'm viewed or thought of in a particular way, so it might be like, I don't know, troublemaker or tame or sounding off again, or what have you. So you get to the point where people think you just have nothing useful to say. So you can give them something you've written, but they're just it can't be, it just literally can't be heard, understood, read, whatever. Whereas in what other little ecosystem world, I've got Ensign that kind of asked me to write something, that paid me to write something. I've got last year you've got 7 papers I was co-authors on. You've got, I certainly just got other stuff where people kind of value me. I did a PhD teaching session last week. These are things where that lift me, so I'm not spending a day in bed feeling like I had to show it. Anyway, sorry, I'll carry on. Most Ensign is a source of expertise. It acknowledges the need to constantly develop and add to this knowledge. They have commissioned Ray Waddingham, a respected LXP consultant, to undertake a PhD exploring what lived experience leadership is. And then there's a link to the work on the website there. I'm very conscious that I'm sending this to somebody with a lot of power. It could be of detriment to my career, particularly locally. Well, if you're going to send this to someone, they might be a bit hacked off. I don't know, I mean, ideally someone won't be hacked off. Ideally they'd, you know, I see it for what it is. The intent it's come from. Anyway, I just say, if some of the people who were harmed before me had done this, maybe I wouldn't be experiencing this now. I'm angry, I'm unhappy, I'm physically and mentally broken, and I'm likely writing an exponentially large kamikaze of an email. I also know that I cannot ethically not write this. I view my discipline as important as medicine, whose staff take an oath to do no harm. If I don't speak, I do harm, and I need to have tangible evidence, if only to myself, that I have raised this issue. It's written, and it's not on my conscience. Thank you for responding. I know that the issue is held in mind, even if it's proven very difficult to address. So that's it. And hopefully some of those points, principles will be useful to other people who are trying to make the points and principles. I know that in some areas people are really open to this, and some of these points that have been raised would actually you know, help. They'd be listened to, they'd be seen as reasonable. In other places I won't be listened to, but it's worth putting it out there if it helps someone. So yeah, that's it. That's all, folks, for today.